Morena, everybody, and welcome to the council meeting of Monday, the 6th of November, 2023, something like 7 weeks till Christmas, just to get you all chirpy. Just a reminder in terms of health and safety, if the alarm sounds, we make our way out that back door, which is our nearest emergency exit. It's a bit chaotic out there on the street, but we make our way across the street and we'll get instructions from staff. Everyone needs to be aware that this meeting is being live streamed, and then the video will be publicly available on YouTube. We have got it live streamed, yes, right. And a reminder to those that are coming up to talk to us this morning, these microphones are really quite sensitive. If you move your head around, you can lose the sound. So if you just speak directly into it and make sure that the green light is on, there's a button to press in the middle of it, and just have one mic on at a time. Thank you. And a reminder to everyone to turn off their mobile phones. And if I had my phones with me, I would turn them off, but unfortunately they're in a hopi. Okay, Shad, can I ask you to open us up with a karakia, please?
Nā koe Anne, tata katoa, kua huitahi nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā tata katoa. Me tīmata hoki tātou, o reira kia noi tātou. E te atua anei rā mātou huitahi nei, ka tuku rā ngā whakamoimiti ngā whakawhetai ki a koe, toro mai rā tōringa kaha ki rungi a mātou, hei āwhina nei, ia mātou I roto I nei mahi. Nō reire te atua tēnei mātou, ine tēnei ki a koe, korore ki tōnga tapu. Āmene.
Thanks, Shad. So apologies, we're all here, so there are none. We open with the public forum, and we have 3 speakers today in the public forum. First up, we have Jodie Brunning, and she is from the Physicians and Scientists for Global Responsibility. Is Jodie here? Would you like to come up to the table? Thank you. And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and morena all. Yes, my name's Jodie Brunning, and I'm a trustee of the PSGR. And this talk is about the uncertainty about pending challenges to the lawfulness of Ministry of Health fluoride directives to TLAs. Local districts have been poorly served by the actions of the Ministry of Health, the Environment Protection Authority, and the select committee processes. Legal and management may elect to ignore this discussion, and PSGR assess from its 5-minute limit that the commissioners may also be uninterested because, yes, it is inconvenient. Ministry of Health studies on fluoride and the prevention of dental caries demonstrate that there may be, but this is inconsistent, a marginal reduction in the prevention of some dental caries. And this marginal decrease must be lawfully balanced against other risks to health so as to protect health. The risk here includes brains and bones, the main target organs of fluoride. And the rule of law in a democracy is founded on constitutional and administrative law principles, and certain rights, obligations, and opportunities follow. And new laws must be reasonable. Processes and procedures followed by officials and elected members must promote trust based on cost and benefit and risk and benefit. And it is the duty of every local authority to improve, promote and protect public health within its district. And the purpose of the Water Services Act is to provide safe drinking waters to consumers. And you'll be aware that safe in the latter act includes other causes together with the consumption or use of drinking water. And you may consider that Auckland and Wellington have been fluoridated since the 1960s, and that extending fluoridation here is based on solid grounds. And with respect to the current state of scientific evidence, solid grounds do not exist. When did the Ministry of Health consider the lowest safe level of exposure of fluoride in drinking water in combination with existing levels of fluoride? And are you aware that fluoride exposures in 5 to 7-year-olds are higher than older age groups? And that's a 2018 study that was ignored by agencies and by the 2021 Inquiry Committee. How much fluoride should be added to prevent harm from prenatal exposures to 0 to 7-year-olds based on Bay of Plenty data? Since the 1960s, studies have persistently shown an association between levels of exposures to fluoride and neurodevelopmental and cognitive and IQ risk, particularly for exposures during pregnancy and up to 7 years. And please note, as the European Food Safety Authority states, fluoride is not a nutrient. Where commonly ingested nutrients have upper limits often by orders of magnitude, for fluoride, the margin is unknown and slim. Fluoride is a neurotoxin, but our authorities do not discuss this. In the 50 years of fluoridating Wellington and Auckland, the NZ have never conducted a risk assessment, either of emissions to water or to assess the lower level, where neurodevelopmental risk and other problems such as skeletal fluorosis may occur. So administrative law requires that decision makers take into account facts which contribute to risk. And so this has not been undertaken. The legislation permitting the Director General to mandate fluoridation of water, which has potential to adversely harm subpopulations, is primarily based on two reviews, a 2014 and 2021 by the Office of the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor, the OPMSCA, a non-regulatory body who had no terms of reference, no methodology to demonstrate that impartial processes were followed. The OPMSCA's 2021 Advisory Committee was overweighted with experts with a bias towards dental and oral health. Indeed, the author of one of the papers, which was heavily weighted in the 2021 update, was on this committee. I think the courts would regard such a bent panel dimly. There were no experts with a focus on neurodevelopmental or cognitive risk on this panel. Many of us appreciate two submission processes to government committees, one in 2016 and one in 2021. Despite thousands, and indeed most submissions from the public expressing great concern for the safety of fluoride and health risk, neither committee took it upon themselves to consider the public's cause for alarm. In fact, both committees dismissed public comments claiming that fluoride safety was outside the scope of interest. Massive reviews of the literature by globally recognised institutions are rare. The US-based National Toxicology Program reviewed the literature on cognitive and IQ risk. It's evident from this review that the guideline limit of 1.5 milligrams per litre, established in 1984, is now arguably unsafe and outdated. The global debate now rests upon the issue of whether the current claimed safe level of 0.7 milligrams per litre is safe or not. The most expert scientific committee in the world will not say that that level is safe, and their case rests upon multiple studies at many different levels, and the fact is no lower limit of exposure has been demonstrated to be safe for cognitive risk and loss of IQ. That NTP study looked at NZ Otago's Broadbent study. NTP scientists were far less favourable of the Broadbent study than the OPMSCA. The NTP considered that there are multiple uncertainties in that paper. The OPMSCA did not carry out a meta review. So despite 50 years of dosing Auckland and Wellington, this is ridiculous. None of our multiple brain research institutes have carried out a study. We do have problems with cognition and IQ in our schools, and there can be no claim fluoridation is not a factor. So these levels were not considered by the OPMSCA, even though the data was available. And there seems to be a very slim margin between exposure levels and so-called safe levels as required by the Water Surfaces Act.
Okay, so look, I'm sorry, but you now at 6 minutes, so I have been rather tolerant, but thank you very much. Thank you. So, you're tabling those, so someone will take those from you. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in. So we have Hamish from Oscar and Otto. Hamish, would you like to come up? Make sure that that microphone is on, and you have 5 minutes.
Good morning. This morning I'm talking on, sorry, it's clearly it's working. This morning I'm talking on the issue of the decision to close the Strand waterfront car park prior to waiting for replacement car parks being available. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners and everyone else. Thank you for the opportunity to speak as the owner of Ostronoto and giving a voice to many downtown traders who are too busy working their businesses. I'm Hamish Carter, and together with my wife, Catherine, we run Ostronoto Cafe, which we set up on the Strand 5 years ago. First of all, I want to thank you for the strong focus you have brought to resuscitating the CBD. We are very excited about the downtown redevelopment plans. Personally, Catherine and I chose to set up our business here or there near the waterfront because it's such a great spot with fabulous potential. But as you all know, in the 5 years since then, downtown has deteriorated significantly with many businesses closing and relocating. The businesses remaining have done so because they too believe in downtown's great potential. We've endured very challenging times and shouldn't be further penalised for choosing to hold on and remain in the CBD with the unnecessary early closure of the car park. Whilst we are excited about the ultimate transformation of the Strand car park into a public space that makes the most of its fabulous position, we believe the decision to close it now will inevitably hurt the remaining CBD businesses. The closure is creating another barrier to come downtown. We welcome the new parks along Dive Crescent, but the wholesale closure of the Strand car park needs to be postponed until the completion of the Harrington Street building and further car parks to make up for this shortage. Putting aside the car park math, the public perception about limited parks has already had an immediate impact on CBD businesses, including our own. Our sales were down 11% last week, with the bulk of missing customers being retired folk and lady lunches who seem to be choosing to go elsewhere. And while 11% doesn't seem like a lot, I assure you, in the tight margin hospitality and retail sector, an 11% drop in sales is the difference between scraping by or having to cut your staff numbers. It's the difference between paying your mortgage on time or having to drain your mortgage to keep the business afloat. The car park closure is likely to be the final nail in the coffin for many businesses, giving up and waiting for the elusive future revival that is still to come. Some will choose to close their doors, others will be forced to do so. But putting aside the emotional story, it really just comes back to the cold hard facts of numbers, car park numbers. The council may argue that the 100 odd new parks in Dive Crescent almost makes up for the 140 lost at the waterfront. But this does not take into account other parks that have been lost and more to be lost again soon. Prior to the new Dive Crescent Park, there were about 20 leased car parks beside Fixation Coffee, and more cars would park along the strip further down Dive Crescent towards Trinity Wharf. About another 60 leased parks were lost on the JWL site directly behind our cafe, which is being redeveloped into the Northern Quarter, while another 50 odd parks will be lost in the former library precinct when work begins on Te Manautaki in the new year.
One more minute.
So that takes up to about an additional 150 uncounted parks gone by then. And that's not taking into account the inevitable influx of vehicles for the major construction projects about to begin. In a previous conversation on the subject with Gareth, he told me the council had calculated at peak Te Manautaki alone would attract 200 extra vehicles during development. Then on top of that, the Northern Quarter development will probably generate another 100, Craig's will generate another 100, and so on and so on. I appreciate Gareth and his team are doing what they can to minimise this impact, and new car parks are set to be developed. But clearly, the downtown car parking problem is going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. And this will mean a worsening impact on the CBD businesses and their customers and they rely on for their support, given that there is no parking. That's why it's critical to delay the closure of the Strand car park until sufficient alternative parks are available. It's all about the numbers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hamish. And the next speaker is Delwyn Cooper from Badminton Multisport. Oh yes, we've got Delwyn, Graham, And Nick, yep,
Yep.
welcome.
So there's
Welcome.
3 of us today.
Yes.
So this
We've
is
still only got 5 minutes.
okay. This is Graham Nielsen, who's our chairperson from Bay of Plenty Badminton. Delwyn Cooper, I'm the Community Development General Manager, and Nick is Chambers from Sport Bay of Plenty, Sport Manager. So we're really here just to put in some support or hoping that you're going to support the paper that's coming up in front of you very shortly for the Badminton Multi-Sport Centre. This is a journey that I've been on for 15 plus years, and it's a journey that's taken us through the spaces and places. We've had this facility has been on that agenda for a long time, and we have had some great support from council and from the council staff. So thank you also to Ross Hudson for his work with us. We are really excited, and as I said, it's a 15-year journey, and we kind of feel like we've got this. We're really here, and we're really excited that this could finally start to happen, and we can make a difference to our sport, but also making it a multi-purpose centre so that we can support a bigger, wider area of the community, especially with the changes that are going to be happening to the QEYC and the shortage of court space in the indoor network. So we just wanted to come here and speak to that, and hopefully look for your support to continue our journey to make this facility a reality, not just a dream.
As you already know, badminton is a growing sport, and our greatest constraint is access to facility. And we're actually finding that we're getting squeezed more and more in the community space. So this is absolutely imperative, and we really appreciate the partnership that the council has engaged with us through this process. So as Delwyn's already says, we're really excited about the prospects, and we're hoping that you guys see it the same way.
Kia ora koutou. From a Sport Bay of Plenty lens, I just want to sort of commend the partnership between Tauranga City Council and staff members, and that's Ross and his team and a number of other people that have contributed to this over a number of years. And I think the most pleasing thing about the paper is to be able to kind of show that partnership can take things further for our community. We are about to experience a probably significant shortfall in indoor community space or indoor facility space. So I think it really is it tests to the fact that through that partnership we can help a growing sport, and that's a priority for Sport Bay of Plenty to be able to serve that community's needs. But it's also important that we take a sort of holistic lens across all of our communities and look to partner where we can, so that we're working effectively smarter, not harder, to be able to solve the solutions that the city has, which you'll all be a lot more aware of than I will be. But yeah, I think I would just like to say that TCC have been a great supporting partner. Bay Venues have been a great supporting partner, and yourselves as well in terms of what you've done for the city has been really, really great for those people that play our sport and that want to recreate around the region and sort of be part of our community as well. So thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. So that's all we have in the public forum this morning. Thank you. Any late items? Not that I'm aware of. None. Confidential business to be transferred into the open. No change to the order of business. That brings us to the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 11th of October. Bear with me, I'm using technology for the first time and it's scary. Any comments or questions on that? Moved by Bill, seconded by Shad. Nothing further. It's a true and correct record. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Minutes of the meeting on the 16th of the 10th. I seem to have gone into fog here. What have I done?
And I'll fix this.
Thank you. Okay, so the minutes of the 16th of October. Chad's moved. Bill seconded. Any comments, any changes wanted to be made? It's a true and correct record of the meeting. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Shad.
Thanks, Ian. Just to note, I'm still contracted to the Crown doing work on RM reform, and we do have paper on Three Waters. I'm not directly involved, but there is a relationship there. I just kind of wanted that noted.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to deputations, presentations and petitions, and we have a petition on the Tauranga waterfront car park, and we have Ashley G here to present that. Welcome, Ashley. Come on up. So you have 10 minutes to present the petition.
Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Ashley G and I'm the chair of Main Street Tauranga, also known as Downtown Tauranga. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the signatories of the petition regarding delaying the closure of the waterfront Strand car park. I would like to start by acknowledging the commissioners and the great deal of the decisions you have had to make over the last few years. An extremely hard task, and I thank you for all the effort you have put in to try and shape our city for the future. We understand that your term is coming to an end next year and that there is necessity to get projects started. However, the speed of commencements, the large number of active projects and future projects that are about to start are tearing our community apart. My role as chair for Downtown Tauranga is majority advocacy for our members. Upon speaking with many members, a petition to halt the closure of the car park was requested, as there is an overwhelming amount of great concern from the business community on the timing of the project. The city centre has been through so much over the last few years due to the impact from construction, and it is only just getting started. Businesses are requesting that the council allow them some support and some breathing space. Over many years now, the growing concern about the number of available car parks in our city centre has become more famous than our city. Downtown Tauranga has been providing feedback and concerns to the City Council about the declining number of car parks for a number of years. Our feedback and concerns were included in the 2022 MRC Agni report that was accepted by Council. At the time of this report being compiled, there were approximately 5,163 public car parks throughout the city core through to 11th Avenue. In the city centre, this consisted of 2,483 car parks spread across on and off street. The decline in car parks has been happening for the last 10 years. Since 2014 today, we note a loss of more than 400 car parks in off-street locations throughout the city centre: Durham Street, Devonport Road, Hamilton East North, Masonette Park, and now the Strand. This does not include on-street car parking that has been removed around the city because of redevelopment and cityscape. 4 and 6 Dive Crescent, over 100 car parks have been redeveloped and operational, and they look great. After 1 week of the Strand being closed, responses from the businesses that this car park is now fully is full by 9 a.m. And we predict most of this is from staff or all-day parking. We understood that the whole car park would be finished prior to the closure of the waterfront Strand car park. Do we know when this will be completed? The abandonment of the Harrington Street Transport Hub was a major blow for our city community. 550 public car parks that are now set to be just 200 available to the public, but with no estimated date of completion. This car park building would have provided instant relief to the parking squeeze, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. The businesses of Downtown Tauranga are not against the redevelopment of the Strand car park to create a better green space and place for activities for everyone in our city. Our view is that the timing of the closure of this car park will be the most crucial timing of the whole transformation project. With many businesses and visitors depending on this space, the closure of the car park will result in a loss of 147 car parks with no alternate option at the peak of trade. The waterfront is one of the most widely used and easily accessible car parks in our city centre. It is also the one space in the city where people feel comfortable and safe to access it. It provides access to hospitality. It provides parking options for shoppers. It provides parking options for clients visiting commercial services. The staff of our business use it as a safe option, especially those finishing up late at night. It enables us to host events and activations, drawing people into our city centre. In the 2022 Agnew report, the waterfront car park consistently shows the highest user rate over the most amount of times per day. Note that this report was generated in May, outside of the peak summer trading, and at a time when we were still seeing 6,000 plus daily COVID results. People were being told to avoid social environments. During May peak times, the waterfront car park was measured in the 90 to 100% occupancy rate and 80 to 90% occupancy on average during the week. Dive Crescent was also indicated to have occupancy of 90 to 100% at peak times and 90 to 100% occupancy rate on an average weekday, and indicating that people were using this car park for more long stays parking. I note that the report only included times during the day and not past 5 p.m. to gauge strain on the car parks due to peak times for hospitality and activities. While car parking continues to decline, the public transport system is slow to respond and nowhere near adequate to be able to provide reliable alternative modes of transport. Businesses are finding it hard to find staff as access to our city is hard and costly. If focus could be put on this major infrastructure piece, the demand for parking will decrease significantly. As more businesses are set to move into the city, bringing more staff, more customers, more foot traffic, are we aware of when the public transport will be running effectively enough to provide a reliable option for city goers? The decrease in mobility parks around the city centre is also a very common response, with a further 10 parks being removed due to the 3 separate projects located at Civic, Masonic and Waterfront. As Dive Crescent is 150 metres away from the closest public facility, how are we ensuring that all members of our community feel considered when they visit our city centre? Immediate improvement of lighting and safety throughout the city centre, including in car park buildings, is required. This is something we have been providing feedback on consistently for a while now. If you expect people to walk further to their vehicles, you have a duty to provide safe movements around the city. Feedback in the 22 report showed people felt unsafe using car park buildings. What has the council done to improve these buildings since then? Communication of the closure of the waterfront car park was provided to all those who utilised the space. It was extremely rushed and did not provide anyone with enough notice. Not all of the city was notified, and signage only went up a week or so prior to the closure. First confirmation of the date of the car park closure was sent to us on the 12th of October, 17 days before the park was closed on the morning of the 30th. Hand-delivered notification of upcoming park closure was down by council staff the following Wednesday. I ran around many businesses in the days following this and noticed that they were unaware that the park was going to be closed. The flyer that was distributed made no clear indication that such significant car park was going to be shut down. It just did not highlight the waterfront car park as a place where people could park. Stepping around, which TCC knew would receive major backlash. For businesses that rely on foot traffic and people being able to have easy access to their locations, such a short notice period with no alternative option in place to the removal was a complete blindside to many, as most are still under the impression that the car park would stay in place until alternatives were completed. They did not believe that their council would inflict further disruption on them and their businesses at the busiest time of year. Heading into summer season, with strain already being heard loudly since the closure of the car park last Monday, what do we expect businesses to do to try and cope with such disruption? The projects are moving too fast for council teams. By delaying the closure of the car park, it will allow TCC's car parking strategy team to come up with further temporary options in the city centre and get these rolled out. A safe, well-lit central taxi stand is required as soon as possible. Mobility parks and gap areas need to be installed. Allow the car park to continue to bring in income that can go towards the redevelopment of the waterfront in the future. Allow some time to re-educate visitors that there is parking available, where this parking is located, and what fees are payable. Allow time for businesses to encourage their staff to take out parking in buildings rather than on street. Let the Cameron Road works be completed and provide some relief to our city centre. As you can imagine, running a business in a city that has been torn apart and rebuilt is extremely tough. Owners are constantly having to adapt. Their businesses and livelihoods are being impacted in so many ways. Visitors to the city centre are getting more and more frustrated as parking becomes harder and harder to find, leaving them being less likely to return. Events and activations to attract people to our city centre are becoming harder and harder to make work, leading to less vibrancy. We are asking for some time. The businesses of Tauranga City Centre are requesting that Tauranga City Council postpones the redevelopment of the waterfront until other viable alternative options are in place, the city is safe, and we can provide a positive experience for all.
Finished. Okay, look, thank you for that, Ashley. And I think we all understand that the disruption is really difficult, and we do have a lot of sympathy for the businesses, both that have coped with the downturn over a number of years. It must have been hard to run a business while the whole city was emptying out around them. And now we're coming in with a lot of disruption. So we certainly do sympathise with businesses and appreciate the efforts that they're going to maintain their businesses and keep the lights on. However, I do have to say that we thought we were working very closely, and we thought that we were listening hard and had made a number of changes, let alone huge investment that the ratepayers are making in the centre of the city. Enormous support right across the city for that investment. So if we just look at parking, I don't know where this idea that the waterfront car park was linked to the Harrington Street car parking came from, because that's now a private enterprise. We have no control over that. And in fact, I don't think as commissioners we even knew the dates that those parks would be available for the public until we visited the site a couple of months ago. So I don't know where that's come from. That was never our intention. For the last 12 months, we've been publishing photos of the waterfront that showed that big lawn there where the car park is, as a new events area, which is being designed to bring events into the city directly opposite all the businesses that you're talking about. We've worked alongside downtown Tauranga, and with the changes that we made to the parking, we made sure that the weekends were free. Again, working with the hospitality industry, we changed the time for charging for parking from 6 o'clock, which it was originally, back to 5 o'clock, in order to help particularly the hospitality industry. We've worked in our parking buildings to free up the lease parks that weren't being used regularly so that there were more parks available for the public. We've put electronic signs up at the entrances to the city showing the number of car parks available in the various places around the city. And as I came in this morning, albeit early, there were 275 in Elizabeth Street, 200 odd somewhere in Spring Street, and almost 100 in Cliff Road. We are revamping Dive Crescent, and when that is finished, there will be over 150 car parks there. We've bought 3 properties at the top end of Devonport Road, and there'll be 100 new car parks going in there. We've done the seismic works in Spring Street. That's now been completed, and so there are more parks available in Spring Street. I've made myself unpopular with the Regional Council by nagging to get some buses out of Willow Street at the request of the hospitality industry so that those bus stops could be turned into car parks right adjacent to the Wharf Street area and the hospitality centre. If we look at the investment that's been made into the city centre, apart from the $303 million that's going into revamping that city centre site, we've made available $500,000 every year to assist with incentives. Some of that was originally based on supporting feasibility studies to try and get more accommodation in the centre city so that there were more people actually living there. We've provided funding to the Chamber of Commerce so that they can provide capability building advice to business owners, and also one-to-one mentoring to help, because there is an army of high-vis people going to be working in the city on a daily basis, and we want to make sure that businesses get some assistance to make sure they're fit for purpose. We've put a lot of money into activations, both short and medium term, in the centre city, like partnering with the Arts Festival to make sure that that was happening in the centre city, and that brought thousands of people into the centre city to help our local businesses. We've put a lot of support around art. So the art gallery, which is being changed as part of the centre city, we've supported them to go into Devonport Road on a temporary basis for 12 months. We've helped them with the rent to do that, to make sure that they remained within the centre city. And of course, we put the library and the service centre into Heipuna Manawai, right in the heart of Devonport Road. We put our administration building, which is under construction, that's $90 million investment, right into the heart of Devonport Road. Over 800 staff will be working there when that's complete. We've put information kiosks. We're funding those around the centre city so that people can find their way around. We're putting in bike parking, safe bike parking again, at the request of what we understood was at the request of downtown Tauranga and many of the businesses in town that have staff that bike in and want safe places for parking. And to address some of the safety concerns, we've employed a full-time safety advisor who is on the streets every day talking and working with businesses. So there is an enormous amount of assistance going into the city centre to help with the inevitable disruption of the works that are happening. So we understand it is frustrating. We're doing, as I say, we're doing everything we can. But if we continue to put off the works, when we came here, that's what the history of this city had been. Every time we opened a cupboard, another plan fell out that had been put together in good faith, and then there were good reasons why it didn't happen either. It wasn't funded, it wasn't the right time. So we have to get on with changing the city, bringing as many people into the city as we possibly can, whether on a temporary day-to-day basis for activities and preferably as many people living in the city as we possibly can. We are contractually bound now to continue with those car parks. We will talk to the staff, but if we put it off, it's only going to start again. We need to do it over the summer. It's a repairing of the seawall. Can't be done during the winter months, and the creation of that big walkway along the parade so that people can get access to the water. We have to do it when the weather's fine. And so putting it off means it might never happen. So no time is the right time. I guess what I'm saying is we do understand it's disruptive. We're happy to keep talking about how we can support businesses as much as we possibly can. But the disruption will continue probably for the next 5 or 6 years. And we've been very honest and open about that and happy to work through together how we minimise that and maximise the opportunities to get people back into the city. But I have to say, publicly talking constantly about how there are no car parks, how it's not safe in the public, that goes in the paper, only worsens the situation, actually, because out in the rest of Tauranga, that's just reinforcing the fact, despite the fact there are many, many empty car parks. And I don't know, I've been to functions at night and never had a problem finding a car park. So all it does is reinforce to people, don't come into town because there aren't any car parks, when in fact there are plenty. And we will continue to provide as many as we can. Okay, so we will consider the petition and we will get back to you. Thank you very much. Yes, I think we need a motion then to receive the petition. Bill, are you happy to move? And Stephen second. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. So that brings us to the business of the day on the agenda, and that brings us to, let me get myself back, the badminton, which is on page 36. Hmm? Oh, God. Their email is useless. Their email is useless. Can you give me a hard copy? Sorry. My technology is not working. I think it's the internet.
Yeah.
Not helping me. Right. Who's speaking to this? Ross.
Morena. As you know, the indoor courts network in Tauranga is under significant pressure. We're effectively in deficit in comparison with levels of service and the demand that's placed upon it. And that deficit is going to grow significantly as the city grows. Also, as you know, council's planning to make significant investments to remediate that issue. Badminton is a popular and rapidly growing sport, and it also struggles to make effective use of the mainstream network for some technical reasons that are outlined in the report. The project that's proposed at Tatua Reserve would provide significant value to the courts network effectively by extracting badminton from it. And the multi-sport component would then also provide additional capacity, particularly in that mount area where we're expecting to eventually lose the Mount Sports Hall, which is at the end of its useful life. The project, which is essentially 8 badminton courts and 2 multi-use courts, has been through a business case process, which we have been involved in as staff, and through a design process, which again, we've had some oversight of. We're confident in the robustness of and cost effectiveness of both of those. Essentially, without going into all of the details that are outlined in the report, we think that there's a strong value proposition here that makes sense for the courts network, makes sense for the city. The funding support that we're proposing is considered appropriate, but also considered that it should be conditional at this point in time, and those conditions are outlined in the resolutions. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Ross. So 15 years of work finally gets to a council table with a proposal to proceed. Any questions? Don't want to put you off. Have you got your hand up, or was that just no? Bill.
Thanks, Chair. Just one, Ross. Just wanted to get a feel for when the proposition's fully developed, how much of that reserve area will it take up?
It'll take up essentially all of Tatua Reserve, yeah, which is, you know, essentially not used at the moment. It's in the Mount Industrial area. Yeah, the building itself will take up a large proportion of the reserve, and then there will need to be car parking as well. Various different designs have been looked at over the course of the last year or two. We're very confident now that the one that's proposed is the right one for that space.
Oh, thank you.
Someone prepared to move it? Yeah, Shad.
If Bill's moving on.
Thought you were moving and
second.
Bill's seconding?
Yeah,
Yep,
either way.
okay.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. So, just in terms of the funding, so our commitment would be $5 million, and the report's quite clear about the benefits, I suppose, to the community in terms of additional court space. What I'm wanting to understand is so we'll have 8 badminton courts and then 2 multi-purpose courts available. The 2 multi-sport courts available to the community, will that pretty much be fixed in time, or at some stage as the sport grows, badminton may need additional capacity?
The latter. So I would imagine that agreement that we have with badminton has check-in points. For example, it might be 5 years for a certain amount of community hours, and then if the sport grows, then they would look to renegotiate that, and hopefully at that point there will then be additional multi-use indoor court space. I would expect there always to be a community use component to that, and that would be appropriate given the level of funding that's proposed.
And in terms of the capacity that's been catered or designed for now, the 8 courts,
Yep.
that caters for the current community. And then thinking about growth over time and triggers of when would that additional space be required?
So the 8 badminton courts certainly provides for badminton as it's currently structured and the demand on the network and more. But over time, certainly the aspirations of these guys behind me is that the sport grows and that they not only provide for local community sport, but actually that centre becomes part of a network of North Island facilities that can also attract events and so on and so forth. And I would say that that's a good thing. Obviously, we are trying to get the balance in terms of the funding level that we're suggesting is appropriate between the growth of badminton and the needs of the wider community for the indoor courts network. And we've done a bit of number crunching, and that's why we've landed at the level that we have. But yes, over time, I would expect council to probably be renegotiating those community use hours at a certain point in time.
And just in terms of the facility itself, so the facility would be able to hold kind of national events and that kind of thing. So from a network perspective or from a national perspective, the quality of the facility would be able to cater for those types of events.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, well, it's been moved and seconded. It seems to me like it's a win-win win, really. It's helps us out. Certainly it's a 15-year dream that's been adequately explained to us on a number of occasions. But it also provides, as so many of the community, particularly around sports, we've heard as the population's grown and the investment into those facilities hasn't happened in the city. It's just ridiculous that you would turn people away from playing a sport. We heard earlier about health and well-being, keeping people active. And I understand badminton's a sport that you can play until quite elderly. Okay, so moved and seconded. I'll put the motion then. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. And thanks very much, Ross, for the work that you've done on this. There we are. Done. Okay. That brings us then to letters of expectation for CCOs.
Morena koutou. We have 3 out of 4 of this year's letters of expectation for Bay Venues, Tauranga Art Gallery Trust and Tourism Bay of Plenty, noting that the Te Manuatake o Te Papa Limited letter of expectation will be presented separately. These letters are being presented about a month or so earlier than usual to enable us to bring forward next year's statement of intent timeframes and create more certainty for our CCOs before the next council starts. Happy to take the letters as read and answer any questions.
Thanks, Sanjana. You've done a great job. Really have done a great job bringing these CCOs up to a pretty good standard, I think. I think from memory, when we first came and looked at the letters of expectation, they're pretty average. So well done. Any questions? Yep, Bill.
Just a clarification, Chair. In terms of, and I understand in terms of the Western Bay District being the joint shareholder, in terms of our letter of expectation, and obviously their one, I presume that they are aligned if they need to be. There's nothing in conflict between the two letters.
Yes, that's right. So the Western Bay of Plenty District Council reviewed their letter of expectation on the 26th of October. So I understand Tourism Bay of Plenty have seen a copy of that, and we've discussed it with our counterpart at that council as well. So while they're separate and the priorities are different, for Tourism Bay of Plenty, they are aligned and not aware of anything in conflict.
Chad.
I had a similar question to Bill. So the letter that went to Western Bay, what was anything that stood out from them in terms of feedback from council?
I will have to get back to you on that, and I'm happy to share a copy of their letter.
Someone like to move? Stephen and Bill second. Any further questions? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thanks, Sanjana.
Thanks very much.
And we'll get the next one done next month. Water Services Reform Update. Stephen, I presume that's you. Welcome back. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, everyone. Yes, I think the paper is pretty much an update on where the water services reform is at the moment. It was obviously written before Friday when announcements were made about central government representation. What we really have in the recommendations is to reflect that we are still involved in doing work around certain work streams of the National Transition Unit, where the benefits will be enduring, especially around things like standards and business systems and so on. The country's been so fragmented for so long, and this will stand it in good stead, no matter what pathway is followed. So we have for a while now been just keeping a watch and see while the elections play out. I think the clarification on where it'll go with the new government, we will stay alongside that, and we will respond accordingly as a project team. And Kathy is here as well as the Manager of Directed Services, and she's very much alongside it like I am. I think the work that was proactively being done by the National Transition Unit around people, because that was and remains one of the biggest risks and concerns around water reforms, is that we have a very limited talent pool, and the workforce is very, feeling the uncertainty play on them. Even although you have up in Auckland a water entity being stood up, they see that as one of their main risks as well, retaining that workforce. So the National Transition Unit has been working very proactively with them. They've been working with us. We've worked through the process with our staff, but at the moment it's kind of on pause while they get more clarity on the pace that things will be going at. Probably just we will. In summary, we will continue to have those conversations with the National Transition Unit, our neighbours through the local transition team. That's all our neighbouring councils in the Bay of Plenty. We're also having dialogue with our partners and councils in the Waikato and elsewhere. And we will, as soon as we have some more direction, we will bring an update to you in that regard, how we should be responding. But currently, we're fulfilling all our obligations under existing legislation. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. And that's really all we can do until the legislation is changed. we have to comply with it. It was interesting in Wellington last week amongst local government, huge amount of uncertainty, particularly with a new coalition partner coming in and no one really quite sure where New Zealand First stands on all the water reforms, or what they might propose for the future. The interesting thing for me was that a lot more people were now focused on the standards and the new standards being proposed by the regulator, and admitting that they'd taken their eyes off that whilst they were arguing over structures. So there was quite a lot of concern being voiced about just that increase in standards, and even, you know, people who thought they had been doing very well, that the cost then of getting up to the proposed new standards. So there's a lot more to come, I would imagine. A lot more to come. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. I just really wanted to reinforce what I think is the importance of us continuing to engage and inform the process. I listened to the Prime Minister on Radio New Zealand commenting on Three Waters this morning as I came in, and he highlighted the issue around balance sheet separation and financing as being the problem in water. And it concerns me that that's how they see the problem, because the problem is actually not financing, it's funding. And the decision-making of local government being a political process, councils have wanted to defer investment to keep rates down, which has created a funding shortfall, which has created an infrastructure deficit. And the reason councils have had to force the rates down is obviously political pressure to do so. And that's not going to change under the national coalition government when it's finally formed proposed reforms. So I'm not convinced that they actually understand the problem yet. And just enabling councils to borrow clearly is not going to be a solution, because many of us, particularly those growth councils, are already up to our debt limits. We can't fund more debt without more revenue. So, yeah, I do think it's really important that we engage in the process and do everything we can to get that message across. The reforms did enable scale, and they also often enable efficiencies. So the combination of scale and direct pricing of consumers to raise the revenue to fund the debt was always the solution. The structure can only contribute to that in some way. And I think that the more the parties in government are informed of the real issues, the better. And if we can play a role in that, then it's an important function that we should play.
Are you moving the recommendations? Thank you, Stephen. Bill, second. Any other comments? No? All right. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So that brings us to the LTP, speaking of water. And so we're going to make a few changes to the adoption, is that right? To the motions on the table. Put them up on the screen, that would be good, thank you. So first off is the adoption of supporting documentation to the proposed long-term plan.
Just talking to this and the amendments that are on the screen, which are relevant for both this report and the next report, is on Friday, Audit New Zealand informed us that they are still working through the audit opinion process with Wellington, and were unable to provide the opinion today. Largely this is due to some of the uncertainty that exists around water reform, and as this is the first long-term plan to be adopted, the disclosures that would accompany that. So therefore, the supporting documents to the long-term plan, I would say would be a very small chance that there will be amendments to these through the additional disclosures, but just to ensure that we've got the ability to do that, we're just proposing some changes to the wording there, which just notes any additional or amended disclosures that may be required. We'll come back to council next Monday for adoption prior to going out for consultation. So, as I said, most of the disclosures will be in the consultation document, which is the following report, but there may be a slim chance that there's some changes within the financial strategy and infrastructure strategies in particular, hence the amendments to this report.
So the 13th of November is a SFR meeting. Are you suggesting a special council meeting? So we need to say an extraordinary council meeting in the recommendation, because there is no 13th of November council meeting. Yep, extraordinary council meeting. Thank you. Yep. Okay, so that takes care of this, these attachments, this documentation. Okay, all right. So open that up for questions on the documents themselves. Bill.
Not so much a question, Chair, just on rereading the consultation document.
No, that's next. This is the everything else but.
Oh, sorry. I'll
Okay, would someone like to move then well, I'm happy to move the recommendations as reported here, except we need to say at the 13th of November extraordinary council meeting. Okay. Anne and Bill. Any discussion on those?
Just wanted to note, Chair, that we've seen these documents on numerous occasions.
Yes.
So it's actually been a helpful process as we've worked that up. So it doesn't really require a lot of discussion today.
Okay, I'll put that. Yeah, shared. Sorry.
I just wanted to note as well that, in terms of fees and charges, gives the community an opportunity to have their input, particularly around the revision of fees and charges. I mean, we've been through that whole process and the advice and benchmarking with BVL. So it gives the community another chance to have their say.
I think we're going to get quite a lot of submissions on that. Okay, I'll put that then. That's with those amendments. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Okay, so then that brings us to the consultation document. And you've got some changes to that recommendation.
Again, very similar to the previous paper, and just need to reflect that extraordinary council meeting in the words on this paper. What we would advise would be that resolutions A and B can be passed, but resolutions C onwards require the audit opinion from Audit New Zealand, which we won't have available until next Monday, so that they would lie on the table.
Okay, and we need to work out a time for that special meeting because the executive away, so they would be zooming in. I'm away, I would be zooming in. Stephen's away, he would be zooming in. So can we do that offline? Yeah.
So Audit New Zealand will also be at that meeting to present their report.
Yeah, that's right. So it'll be largely offline meeting. So we're leaving D and C, D and E on the table. And we put in another extraordinary council meeting. Yep. Right. Bill, go.
No question, Chair, but on rereading the consultation document, I came across 2 or 3 incorrect references to streets and 1 or 2 other things. So if I can give staff those after the meeting.
And deal with that next week under resolution E, if it's only really minor drafting and correction of errors. So, yep.
I was just concerned, I was just trying to find it quickly, where we talked about upgrading the centre city and we talk about 503 million, and I think the ratepayers will immediately jump to thinking that our 303 million has already gone up by 200 million. And we might need just a little note because it includes a whole lot of other stuff.
Yeah, we can get that broken down. Yep.
Okay, so we'll pass on any of those sorts of things to you prior to that. Okay, so can I have a mover then for the adoption of the consultation document as outlined on the screen? So we're receiving the report, approving it for the long-term plan, noting that additional or amended disclosures being required by Audit New Zealand will be tabled at that special meeting, and the balance of the items will lie on the table until then. Stephen, you moving that?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that, and I think it's an excellent document. I too noticed one or two relatively small matters which we can pass on, but I think credit to the team for telling a complicated story in a relatively simple manner.
Language is very, very good. It's a very readable document. Unfortunately, I think that not many people will read it, but yeah. And were you seconding it, Shared? Thank you. Anything else? Okay. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Again, we've spent a lot of time on this already, so we're not spending a lot of time debating it at this stage. That brings us to 11.6 and the deliberation on the options to fund the ratepayer portion of Te Manawataki o Te Papa.
Yep, so this is bringing the results of both the verbal and written submissions, just under 300 submissions received. Just draw reference really to table 10, which provides a breakdown of the submissions in the paper. There were 74% effectively supporting it, but we do note that the nature of the conversation on the IFF was really split between the project itself and the levy, and clearly some of the words didn't align with the submission. So we've tried to break that down to a further level to come, and which resulted in there were 47% of submitters that there was clearly aligned to supporting the levy and their statements in it. And so that's broken down to a little bit more detail than just taking the pure numbers in the table in terms of what people selected. Any questions?
Yeah. So we got some of the same old naysayers who don't want to spend any money and are quite happy to let the centre city die and look like something out of a Western movie with the tumbleweed tumbling down through the main street. But I do recommend, I do recognise some of the points that submitters made about debt and the visibility of debt. But when one of the problems for local government is that a large percentage of our debt is actually tied up with paying for growth or underwriting growth, and so it actually restricts our ability to fund other things in our community because of that high level of debt, which can be in there for quite some period of time, as we have no control over when those development contributions are repaid by the developer. So we have no tools or few tools to speed that process up. We have no tools to control it. And so local government is severely constrained by that. So all the discussion has been around how do we find alternate ways of funding. And yes, you still want to be transparent about the fact that that's debt, and it's really good to see that such almost half understood that. And I was quite surprised actually, because it's quite a complex model, but actually we got 47% really understanding what it was all about. And the other thing that came through from the submissions was that yes, it does cost a little bit more than if we did it the traditional way, but also people recognise the certainty of it, both the certainty of the cost that they will bear and the certainty that the project then continues. I thought that was an interesting, because we heard that through the consultation on the LTPA when we went out. People just wanted to know that this was going to be built and this was going to happen, because so many plans had got started and then people had all sorts of reasons why they wanted them delayed and not to happen, that people were saying they needed that certainty. And also that intergenerational payment, and that theme came through from the submissions as well. So this is a big project, and 2, possibly 3 generations will enjoy the benefit of it, and should be contributing to the payment. So I was really heartened by the number of submissions that understood that. Having said that, we still want to make sure that it's a good deal for the ratepayers. And so I think it's good that we're not committing to a deal here. We want to see the whites of the eyes, if you like, and what that deal looks like before we make the final decision. I think that's the sensible way for us to go. But I was really heartened by the quality and the understanding of almost half of those submissions. Any questions for Paul? Stephen, you're looking at me as if you wanted to contribute.
Thank you, and I totally agree with the comments that you've just made. I did have a question, or a couple of questions, Paul, just really for clarification. So in paragraph 22, you refer to the fact that even if the debt were raised on the council's balance sheet, the current trends and interest rates appear to be, this is my inference from what I've read, appear to be not that dissimilar from the sort of levels of rates we were paying on IFF. Is that a correct interpretation of that?
Yes and no. It certainly is from a rate perspective. Probably the big difference is the tenure of the borrowing that would be undertaken. And that's what we're just working through at the moment, is because obviously a 30-year tenure at higher margins is quite a lot different with what we would do through LGFA if margins are higher, if rates are high at the moment. So that's that. So yes, in terms of the rate, they both move relatively similar, but the length of tenure is where the conversation becomes different.
So is there any prospect of a refinancing option under IFF?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And when we did the TSP, the Transport System Plan, there's a gross and a net rate that is used. The gross rate is effectively the locked-in rate. The net rate is as it's refinanced, potentially is, if over the course of that there is an opportunity to actually change those rates going forward. So that's part of the conversation that we will work through when, moving to conversations with financiers.
And I think that's, some of the issues raised by submitters were in around the cost of finance, and, all of those points are totally relevant to addressing that risk. The other factor which didn't perhaps come through in the submissions as much as I thought it might is in the event that an IFF did default for some reason, then the backstop for that would be the Crown, not the council, correct?
If an IFF defaulted, it would depend on, most likely that would be a default from a council, which the similar powers under the Rating Act are applied as to the levy. So whilst the special purpose vehicle may use those powers, they'd be using very similar powers as the council would be, if that makes sense. So that's the powers under the Rating Act, which are things like mortgagee demands or property sales, which council has never done, but those tools still exist under the IFF legislation as they do under the Rating Act.
But the security is still over the council's revenue streams.
Correct.
In whatever form that might be.
Over the not the councils, but the levy payers' property, right, effectively, is the underlining security, which is what gives it a strong rating still. Yep. There is some conversations going on at the moment about the ranking of rates and levy where they rank, but in terms of default, the ranking is behind rates, but still with the over the property is effectively the security.
Anything else? Sorry, you moving that then? Yep. Bill, you second. Any other questions? Okay, so we're receiving the report. We're receiving the 297 online submissions and 4 written submissions. We're receiving the verbal submissions that we had at the council meeting. And then we're approving option 1 to fund the ratepayer share to be developed, and then further detail reported back to council before we finally adopt it. So we're taking from the process then the majority support us to go ahead, but we're not making that final decision until we get the actual deal. And so the staff will inform all the submitters, and then we are authorising our Chief Financial Officer to work with Crown Infrastructure Partners and continue to develop a proposal and report back the outcome of that process in March 2024 in time to put it into the long-term plan as we make the final decisions. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. And thanks, Paul and the team. You've done a great job. Done a great job so far. We'll judge you when you bring the deal back, I guess. Okay. Temporary alcohol areas. Who's doing that?
So I'll speak to this. So Barbara's not in attendance. So this is really just an annual process to put in the alcohol-free areas which enable events, particularly over that Christmas, New Year period. I know the commissioners had requested to understand why we do this every year. We did put a report up through SFR in June of this year suggesting that it get incorporated into the bylaw and effectively become permanent, but the resolution of that meeting was not supportive of that. And so that required us to come back on an annual basis. So in a similar manner to previous.
Okay.
So here we are.
All right. Well, that answers that question. You happy to move? All right. Moved by Bill, seconded by Shad. Any discussion? Yep.
So just in terms of the events, so this approach essentially gives the opportunity to modify. So depending on the event, time of year, so Ferguson Park may not be an event area for next year, maybe in another location. So provides that opportunity for next year, the council to consider this again.
Does, although we do know that these are key parks and venues that are likely to have activities over that Christmas, New Year period, but so.
Jeremy's coming up.
I need to help out a second. There are 2 sets of temporary liquor bans. There's the geographical ones along the beaches, for instance, which go generally from the same date each year to the same date each year in the same geographical stretch. That was what came up in the June meeting, and you didn't want to do that permanently at that stage. You did it for 1 year, so we'll have that conversation again next June. These ones are event specific, and events do come and go, exactly the point. And sometimes it'll be the 27th, and sometimes it'll be the 28th, and sometimes Bay Dreams will be the 1st and 2nd, and sometimes it'll be the 2nd and 3rd. So these ones would always have to be an annual basis. So there's 2 different sets of temporary liquor bans.
And from memory, didn't we put the first lot off until after we'd done the LAP?
We had a broad conversation. Eventually you adopted those liquor bans on the beach for this summer because time was of the essence. At that stage, you also indicated you wanted to have a look at the liquor bylaw in its entirety. And Sarah's got a piece in the executive report which completes that loop in the next item or item two times.
Okay, it's good. Thank you very much. That's helpful. Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. That brings us to the exec report. And we'll start off with infrastructure.
It would be me then,
That would be you.
wearing the neck hat. I'll probably just touch on a few things that happening in the infrastructure space. Good to see the capital program assurance division is now fully resourced, and as you've seen, the reporting and the standardization of processes that have come out of that team have been superb. So we really, the rest of the group and the organisation are using that extensively. The waters team, I've got a few things to say there, as you'd expect. It was really good to see our laboratory get their IANZ, or International Accreditation New Zealand, again, which is really important because we undertake all the drinking water, wastewater and stormwater testing for both our city as well as the Western Bay. And as you can imagine, with the regulators being a lot more stringent about reporting and accuracy of information, this is a really good news story for us. They're a great team down there. They do great work. Also, the waters team did really well at the annual Water New Zealand conference and awards. We picked up the Best Project award, and as well as the Health and Safety Award for the work done on the outfall with the remote operated vehicle, or ROV, and got really good accolades around that. There's several other councils that are also talking to. It's a local firm, Bay Dynamics, who manufactured it. It's a superb work, good Kiwi ingenuity. And there are quite a few outfalls around the country that do need to be looked at, as you can imagine. We also had Peter Byers, who's the Water Services Manager. He and Ryan Orr from GHD picked up an award for the best paper, and you guys have heard the Water Watchers program presentation Peter's brought to the table here. It's good to see it being recognised at that level. It means people are working with the community, that water is an all year round issue to be aware of and get closer to. And others are showing a lot of interest in how we've done that. The transportation team, I can say that they have some good stats in the report around the increase in number of cycle trips that are being undertaken across the city. There's also some good news working with the fire service and making it safer outside the fire station down the road for cyclists and pedestrians, and designed that system around their needs. Also, they've managed to secure some significant additional funding from Waka Kotahi to do a bit of more maintenance over the year, which it's always good to get money out of another party. And then the sustainability and waste team, they're doing some really good work, especially around the work with our, they were present at the STEM festival with their House of Science, doing a rubbish sorting game and teaching children, and they've about the importance of recycling, but also they've supported the appointment of 5 undergraduate students to complete the summer research projects as part of the Tauranga Moana Futures program. So it's good to be involved in all these initiatives where the people who are going to own the problems of the future, we're alongside them and have them with us. That's me.
Very well done. I was the picture showing the change at the fire station sort of reflected last week. I don't know about people coming into town for lunches, but it was a very wet week, and the picture reflects that adequately. The pity was the cycling graph is upside down, because I looked at it and thought, this is not showing what we were hoping it was going to show. show. And I couldn't understand why we had buzzy bees, but if you turn it up the right way, you can see we've got cyclists and it's all on the up and up. But it's really good to see, and it reinforces what the transport team have been telling us, that aiming at that larger group of cyclists who will cycle if they feel safe, and in areas like where we've provided good, safe cycleways to see the increase is makes it all worthwhile, because it can be quite expensive. Any questions for Stephen? I think that was all I had. Yep, Bill and then Stephen.
I'll have to come back to you on that one, Bill, but as I understand it, it's how it's funded in each year, and whether there was some funding still available and we applied for it. I think it's more along those lines. Yep. They found it in the back of the sofa.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because I think we had the same issue last financial year too. Yeah. And just reiterating the commentary around the cycling on, because there's been some quite significant increases over the period. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Stephen.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the CPAG team, the transport team, for their awards. Extremely well done. I think it's a sector of the council we are rightly proud of, and it's great to see that being recognised at the national level as well. On the cycling, it's important to note the significance of those increases. And I could highlight it to the media that are here or listening, just the level of increase. Have a look at 46% overall year to date. That's a pretty incredible sort of an increase. I've been somewhat sceptical in the past about the level of investment that's been going into cycleways, as I think many people who live in Tauranga have been as well. But you have to acknowledge the percentage increases are quite remarkable. 95,000 on Totara Street, which is an incredible number, up 26% on last year, and 1,700 odd trips. That's a kind of a lane of a motorway at full capacity, now being avoided, if you like, because cycle trips are being made. And I think it's also important to recognise the scooter mileage. What we're seeing here is a sort of a change in mobility and an increase in micro mobility, which the council has to provide the infrastructure for. And it's really pleasing to see that the investment is paying off. And when you consider the capacity of those corridors, the potential for the future is quite significant. So I think it is important to recognise that, because it's not the public perception, but the stats are telling us actually what is happening. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Just similar kind of theme. I did a kind of a back of the envelope kind of calculation. So looking at those numbers, if you think about the users, I mean, there's 500,000 trips made. Sorry, I mean, if I take the 500,000 trips made, the 40,000 a month. If you're going say to and from a particular location, that's roughly half. And scaling that right down to a week and then to a day, it roughly works out to about 1,000 trips per day, which is essentially 1,000 less vehicles on our road. So freeing up capacity on the transport network for people that actually need to use their vehicles is a good thing. And then also the investment that the council's made. So, there's these positive benefits for road users and the investment that council's made for cycling infrastructure, which I think is really important. And I expect this thing to continue to grow over time. 46% is great this year. Be interesting to see what it would be next year. But yeah, just really wanted to wanted to support previous comments on that. And then also on the waste work, that's regional waste that's currently underway, and the business case that we're doing over at Tauranga. But I think taking that regional perspective and hopefully getting some commitment from our regional partners, and then potentially some resource to help assist with the development of those facilities, or a user pay system. So kind of thinking about both, either supplemented by our regional partners or a user pays kind of philosophy. Yeah.
I think it's going to work both ways, because I know around the different parts of our region, they're looking at different ways, but the important thing is that we're working regionally on our waste. Can you take back to the water staff our congratulations on the recognition that they've got, and particularly for Wally and his life membership. They don't come easily, so we're very proud of them. Pass that on, thank you. Anything else? Okay, community services. Barbara isn't here. Who's doing that for her?
We'll take a team effort on this one. Yeah.
She always has the best pictures. Okay, any questions? Yep, Shad.
Just a comment. Bill and I were at the Potirio meeting on Friday over at no, it wasn't Friday, it was Wednesday over at the Mount Surf Club. And we had a couple of guys from the ops team present who do a lot of the work on Mobile itself. And I was talking to Josh, is he the manager or? Yeah, the ranger, and he commented, in our previous contract arrangement, you would see the contractor maybe once a week kind of thing. Well, these guys are on mobile pretty much every day. They love their job. It was a beautiful day on Wednesday, so you can kind of see great work environment to be up and on the mountain. And the level of service in terms of what they're delivering has increased significantly from feedback from Josh. So I just wanted to commend the team, but also thinking about, it made sense in terms of the decision we made about bringing a lot of those services back in-house, getting that commitment and that buy-in, particularly from our staff, and that passion for what they do. And it was evident talking to these guys on Wednesday. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Both Josh and his colleague were recognised last week at the New Zealand Recreation Association conference in Wellington for the work that they're doing around mobile. So it's been noticed.
I just had a question. I don't know whether there's anyone here that can answer it, but perhaps I can come back to me. So just looking at the Kāinga Tūpu Task Force's review of homelessness in the Western Bay of Plenty and their strategy and action plan, we had a visit last week or the week before last from Dr. Wendy Gillespie, who said, and this was ahead of a new government coming in, but that MSD was cutting the transition funding for homeless. And so I just wanted, there's no reference to it here. It would have a significant, it will pose a significant change to homelessness. And I just wondered whether we were over the top of that, and whether that Kāinga Tūpu group was looking at what would be the consequences of that. So if someone could come back to me, that would be helpful. And then my other question on tsunamis, when we talked about the release of the tsunami, the new tsunami maps, we talked about updating the Papamoa escape routes, because I think they were done quite some time ago, and there's been houses developed in some of the places. And I know the Papamoa Ratepayers Association's been doing a bit of work, and I just wondered where that was. I thought, again, I'm happy if someone comes back to me with that, but where are we with just doing some more mapping? And I'm not sure whether we're still in community services. I think we are. Freedom camping, or is that under someone else? It is, it's further on down. Yep, so that's me. Anyone else? Bill?
Just a comment, Chair, particularly around the two pathways in terms of the Papamā one and the Marine Parade. For what has been relatively modest investment.
Is your mic on?
It is, I'll bring it closer.
Oh, that's better.
For relatively modest investment, the response in terms of those two facilities has actually been really, really great. And the feedback certainly that I've got, and particularly from those who have been using the Marine Parade, it's been really pleasing in terms of how positive that's been. It was one of the first matters that was on our plate when we were appointed as commissioners. People are so keen to use it that they find ways to get around the barriers of those sites still under construction. So it'll be great when it is completed in terms of that particular project.
Huge compliments to the staff who designed it, because I think we talked about just getting on with it and just getting a pass, but they haven't. They've taken the time and actually made a really interesting pathway that takes in those views up into the dunes. They've really done I think it's a superb design. It's made an enormous difference, and it's also helped then preserve the other areas of the dunes, because they're it's not as if you can't go into them at all, but it is shepherded where you can go, so it makes looking after the dunes a lot easier.
There's not a lot of foot traffic on the other side of the road where the pathway is open. So, but I concur in terms of the aspect and the view from it too.
Anything else? Okay. Chief Financial Officer.
Just in addition to the regular airport update, just to recognise that we've now issued our first green bond through the LGFA of 10 million. So not a massive financial discount on it, but every little bit helps. So 5 basis points there. For the airport. Really just update on the development, which is moving forward around the rescue fire area at the moment. And just to recognise that there was I think it was weekend before last, there was a light aircraft that with the strong winds got into a little bit of trouble, but the good news is the 2 passengers and the dog walked away unharmed.
We were just talking earlier, all the flights are full. It's really hard to get a booking. It's it's expensive, and you've got to book well in advance. So they're doing well. And it's hard to find a car park. So it'll be good when the renovations are finished and there's a bit more car parking there. Stephen.
I was just going to make that observation, and I note that the 135,000 passengers this time last year is almost exactly the same as the 135,000 this year. And I just wonder, to what extent are we at capacity? Is that what's capping that? And capacity utilisation numbers out of Air New Zealand would be an interesting stat, because certainly as a weekly flyer, there is seldom an empty seat on any flight that I go on. And we're seeing that not only on the planes, but also on the car parking. And it does indicate that we are nearing capacity, anecdotally anyway.
Get some Ray to include some more information from Air New Zealand for the next report, but it has been high load factors for quite some time, so it does reflect that.
Certainly see it in the airfares, I can attest to that.
Yeah. Okay, strategy, growth and governance.
Just a few minor points in there, so just happy to take any questions.
Interesting discussions amongst local government members last week on workshops. We don't have many workshops, and most of them are open, but the suggestion was made that some of the cabinet workshops could equally be made open. But however, no questions? Yep.
Well,
Shan.
just a question, but just in terms of the social procurement policy that we signed off a week or two ago, I don't have visibility, but you might know whether Western Bay or the regional council have anything similar. And I'm thinking about from a mana whenua perspective, boundaries don't mean anything. And it would be good to get some alignment in terms of what we're doing to give some certainty and security, particularly from a mana whenua perspective, and also our Pacifica whānau as well.
But enough of any specific policy. I know that Western Bay have a sort of cultural focus, and cultural as in their organisational culture does focus on working with mana whenua, but we can find out and send you some information.
I suppose it would be good to promote it amongst our colleagues.
The only thing that worried me about that was I'm assuming that those are groups. Is it? That I'm looking at in para 58? Yeah, and it doesn't include we had the Maori Business Advisory Group in here a couple of weeks ago. It doesn't include them. So I'm sure they've been including them, but that's a whole network. Okay, corporate services.
Morena, the Western Bay doesn't, morning, the Western Bay doesn't have a target of any sort.
Oh, okay.
That out, so it might be one to raise with them. Just a couple of headlines. Over the summer period, university students tend to look for work. We have 17 joining us. 1/3 will be from the University of Waikato. The others will be from around the country, which is great. The market's softening in terms of labour opportunities, which is fairly typical around an election. We have filled a number of more harder to reach vacancies as a result, and we've also seen a flattening and a dropping of our turnover as well, which is all consistent. The other side of the story for this report is really getting hygiene right as we go into the new year. So you'll see in the digital area and also in the legal and risk area a number of activities that are about getting us ready for a ramp up in our CapEx program. Things like managing our contractors better, our retentions when service is under-delivered. And the only one on community relations is that we've been communicating a lot around natural hazards. And it's important to manage that as a portfolio approach. As matters change and seasons change, we need to have an integrated program and a story to tell rather than reacting to each item that staff want to undertake or that the community undertakes.
Any questions for Alistair? Good to see that staff retention. Yep, Shad.
Just on that one, is that typical across the local government sector, or are we bucking that trend?
We're bucking the trend. You would see above 20% for most metro councils. There's change going on at a number of them at the moment, which exacerbates the number, but as a general rule, below 15% is ahead of the curve.
Good. Really, really interesting things you've got those students doing during the summer holidays. Okay, nothing more? Regulatory and compliance?
A couple of highlights to mention. You'll see that we refer to the IANZ assessment results for this year. Been 2 years since we've had an assessment, and really pleasing to see only 8 non-compliances come out of the assessment. The auditors did note the significant improvements that have been made across the board since the last 2 assessments in particular, and importantly, no technical issues in our processing and inspections. So, for example, example, some of the non-compliances were whether we're recording our training program appropriately, and when we make decisions about extending building consent applications, are we doing that in the right way? So we've got action plans being prepared at the moment, and they'll be going to IANZ for their approval, and we will report back in full to council on both the non-compliances and the actions that have been agreed. On paragraph 114, you'll note we talked about applying to MB's Freedom Camping Transition Fund. This was successful. So we've got $25,000 this year to improve our education campaign over summer. We will employ some ambassadors to be working at the hotspot areas that we know about, and we will be upgrading some of the signage across the city as well to make it clearer for people who intend to Freedom Camp. And just following on from Jeremy's discussion about reviewing those area-specific alcohol bans, I've got a paragraph in there from paragraph 97. The Strategy, Finance and Risk Committee asked for options on whether or not these should be adjusted, and we did work with a number of partners across the city on whether those should be now, or I think a real feeling was, particularly in the city centre, let's get Te Manawataki or Te Papa finished, let's get the city centre revitalisation finished, and then relook at whether some of those areas can be lifted or not.
Questions? Bill, then Stephen.
Thanks, Sarah. Your last sentence on para 83, just acknowledging that in terms of that percentage that were granted within the statutory timeframes. I suppose the ongoing concern, though, is that the volumes were down, and then as were the meeting of the statutory timeframe. So it's just reinforcing the need for whatever needs to be undertaken to get that performance lifted. I do note in terms of some of those old consents, so it's how we get some of those out the door, but also keep dragging down that performance timeframe, because for average member of the public, all they'll see is the percentage. They won't know what's behind, and then the perception is that we're well behind the 8 ball and meeting our statutory obligations.
Certainly was a feature of the commissioners clinic last week, which we won't talk about publicly, but we need to have, I do think we need to have a good look at this. Stephen.
As you know, I'm keeping an eye on Code of Compliance certificates to see how they're tracking, and we had 57, and I read of which 21 were units in a multi-storey development. We should be doing, i.e. the collective we, not the council, but the city, should be doing at least 100 a month. More would be better. And if you look at the graph over the last wee while of the green bars, it's not a happy story this year to date as compared with previous years, when we were even in previous years not meeting that target. So it all just underlines the criticality of that long-term supply of housing. And when we have a downturn like we do now, it just creates a bow wave of housing gap and therefore housing affordability. So underlines the importance of keeping track of that, I think. It should be really good to see that as a kind of a target versus an actual, just so that we know how we're comparing, certainly on a year-to-date basis. Because CCCs are largely houses ready for occupation, which is more informative than consents.
Anything else? Shared.
Thanks, Sarah. Just in terms of para 127, we've got the Sanderson's fast track COVID fast tracking process underway, processing through the EPA. Do we have timeframe, do we understand what the timeframe is for processing and decisions on that?
What we do know is that once the EPA process commences, there's only 50 working days for a decision. So, I mean, there are stop clocks within that, but we are expecting it early on in 2024. We've received a number of requests for information, which we are anticipating will be delivered within a couple of weeks. So they're convening their panel. They are pulling together all the information that they need. So it's full speed.
And from what I understand with that processing, there are no appeal rights in that process.
Correct.
Okay, so under parking and bylaws, you note that there's been almost a 20% increase in the number of parking complaints. Is that from people who've got a parking fine and then complained?
The complaints that we're registering are where people call up for help, where people are parking in inappropriate places, or there might be a car in a bus lane. That's those complaints.
Okay. Oh, okay. So that's quite a good thing.
That's a good thing, but I
Yeah.
suspect if we were reporting on how many people were also complaining about their parking tickets, they would be high as well.
Right. Okay. And then the 40% increase across the board for bylaw related complaints, that's the same. That's parking on booms and things, is it?
So the bylaw complaints are largely around people in freedom camping areas that are there for longer than they should be, or homeless people in particular areas that we know about. That's where those complaints are coming from for bylaws.
So that's a huge increase, which indicates which is why I asked about the results of MSD cancelling, because we could see an increase in the number of people sleeping on the streets. I don't know whether a 40% increase is an increase in numbers or a decrease in tolerance, but it's probably a combination of the two. And if that gets worse, then we've got quite a growing problem in the city. Okay. Did you want to add into that, Bill?
Yes. And on a similar theme, because my interest, Sarah, was given the bylaw and the extension of the no parking on booms through to 11th Avenue, whether that had generated a particular bow wave or increase in complaints and tickets in that space.
I'm not aware of that particular issue being responded to. Some of I think the things that we have been noticing is in particular areas, new development areas where there are not a lot of parking available. People are parking both their vehicles and things like caravans and boats on the berm and disrupting pedestrian access as well. So that's been a real topic for the team at the moment, not so much down that 3rd to 11th Ave. Yep.
And it's going to continue as long as there's no requirement for people to put parking on developments. The bus lane infringements, so we get quite a lot of complaints to us that there's no decent signage to say, you know, when you can cross into the bus lane, and the one that I see the most is the one going to where you turn left to the airport along Hewlett's Road. There's some signs that have gone up recently. Are they marking where it's safe to go? Because I don't know about anyone else, but I never know. I have no spatial knowledge whatsoever. I don't know what 50 metres looks like. So it's you know, I have some sympathy for people that get pinged when they cross over into that lane too early, especially when you're in a long line sitting at a red light, and you could actually help people move off the bridge and into Hewlett's Road by going into that left turning lane. So are we responsible for the signs? I know we're responsible for the fines, but is there good signage?
We are responsible for the signs, and we can take a look at that. It's been constantly reviewed particularly in light of complaints that do come in. And we often, it's definitely education first when people might get an infringement notice or a warning letter. It's where people are making that same mistake several times and they know that it's a bus lane is when we'll take enforcement action. But we're constantly reviewing those and we'll make sure that there's enough there.
Just that sense that you're actually holding traffic back up on the bridge when you could actually be making space. It just seems, I mean, personally, I can't see why they can't be T2 and bus lanes. And we've been asking for that since we arrived, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere. On Freedom Camping, we talked about reviewing the sites which haven't been reviewed since the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand. Is there a timeline for that?
I think there's a list of strategy policies coming to the SFR committee. So we do that every 6 months. And I think it'll be on that list. I'll just check. So as part of the overall work program.
Okay.
That is on that list. I was just looking to see if Jeremy was here because he could give that update, but it is on the list.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. And then finally on para 129, I didn't quite understand what you were saying. We had a look at Airbnb from a rating perspective. I guess my question is there something in our city plan or our district plan is that what you're getting at in that para?
Apologies for any confusion. Yes, temporary accommodation is not provided for within the city plan and a resource consent is required. And we respond to those issues just on a complaint basis. So we're not proactively monitoring those requirements under the city plan. We respond when there's complaints made about noise or in particular traffic issues and parking.
We know that there's about, I think when we had a look at it, there were about 1,300 of them across the city. Yeah, most of which weren't consented. Okay. That's probably our city plan not keeping up with modern accommodation trends. All right, I think that's me. City development and partnerships. I did read out your long list of work that you've been doing.
Yeah, it was a long list, which is great. Te mare tātou. Just a couple of highlights from the exec report. Another circa $1.5 million of external funding procured for a wide variety of important community projects. Today marks the opening of the cycle facility in the city centre, so keen for go for a wander down there soon and check it out. Recently held a karakia on the waterfront and in Masonic Park to acknowledge the start of works in both of those locations, followed up with the handover of Site A to Willis Bond last week. So all of our projects progressing at pace. There's a long list of updates and information in there. I guess 3 key things, all of the same theme, i.e. finished before Christmas. Dive Crescent South Car Park, Tunk Reserve and Elizabeth Street East all scheduled to finish before Christmas as planned. So happy to answer any questions.
So thanks for that, Gareth. And the Masonic Park the contract's been renegotiated so it can be done in 2 parts to take account of the businesses to enable them to operate through summer.
Correct. Yes, we maintained their LTO spaces outside their businesses over the summer period so that they can still trade, and then we'll do that part last.
I think I forgot in my long lengthy of assistance to businesses that we've actually reduced that license to occupy by 80% across all businesses in the city centre.
Correct. The license to occupy fees, not their space.
Not the space, no, the dollars, yeah. So the work that they were doing in Dive Crescent on the street, so had a few people question, we seem to have done some work, then gone away and then come back and dug it all up again. But there's a better answer than that, is there?
I can find out the answer. I think it relates to a stormwater issue and the age of a pipe that was found when we were doing our work. But I can get the exact lowdown on that.
Perhaps I could have an attempt at this. So, Gareth, you're right. So as they were doing the works there originally, they came across a pipe which they hadn't anticipated. At that point, they needed to do some redesign, so they closed the road up, knowing that they would have to come back and fix it up afterwards. And so that's exactly what's happened. They're just going back and doing work that they knew they had to do, but they wanted to keep the traffic flowing throughout the course of that project, which they did.
And that's, and that's really the point I wanted to get that point made, is that that's the way we're doing things now. In fact, we saw that the mistakes that were made in Cameron Road Stage 1, where, the risk is always when you dig a hole, the services aren't what you quite expected. And so instead of leaving that hole with traffic management around it and causing disruption for a long period of time while it's redesigned, you close it back up, let the traffic go, and then come back. And that's exactly what's happened in Dive Crescent. So it's good to see that is happening. Minimises disruption. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I really just wanted to underline the importance of the work that is going on in Gareth's team, and in particular, dealing with this car parking perception question. I say perception because when we received the data earlier, it showed clearly that the number of car parks in the city were actually up today than what they were 6 months ago. So with the extra 150 car parks coming on now, with Spring Street car park now having been completed, there is more available than there was in the past. And I'm really worried by the message that is constantly being portrayed by Main Street and in the newspaper that there's an ongoing parking crisis in the city, when all of the data is telling us the opposite. We're actually getting more turnover in car parks than was the case before with the imposition of the parking charges. Occupancy of long-term parking is only 13% in the latest report that I saw. The rest of it, the other 87%, was constant turnover of cars being in the city for less than 2 hours. I look at the monitors as I come into the city every morning. This morning there were over 500 car parks available at 8 o'clock when I came through, and it's consistently, large, long lists of numbers of vacancies. Dive Crescent was only about 2/3 full. There were still quite a few. As I drove past Hamilton and Harrington, there were parks all over the place. Now, admittedly, that's early in the morning and before the shops open. But nevertheless, there are still vacancies, even anecdotally, as I'm going around the city. Last Monday, I made a particular point of eating in the city, doing my little bit to try and help the local restaurateurs. The comment I rather jokingly, but with some meaning, pointed out there were more car parks than there were restaurants open. And so there's a whole combination of perceptions that are driving an agenda here that is negative for the CBD, when in actual fact, the story is quite a bit different to that. So I think it is really important that the data on actual availability of car parks is regularly reported so that it can be picked up, and so that Main Street actually understand and know what the real facts are, because there are quite a few examples, and I sympathise totally with the businesses. If I were in their position, I'd be feeling the same, but it's important that we actually are informed in this debate and understand that parking is available and people can come to the city, and it is a great place to come, and there are lots of activities happening, not the least of which is just having a look around and seeing all of the cranes and all the growth that is occurring in the CBD. It's a really positive story, but we're not hearing it. So I do think it's really important. Thank you, Gareth, for doing that work, and I would encourage the comms team to be proactive about communicating out what the data is actually showing. And on top of those numbers of car parks, we've got another 40 coming in Dive Crescent in about a month, and new car parks opening up in Devonport Road early in the new year. And then, of course, we're looking forward to the Harrington Street building finally being opened, hopefully around mid next year. So the prognosis looks pretty good, notwithstanding it's actually not that bad now either. So I think that story needs to be told.
Yep, I completely agree. And always looking for ways to try and get that message out there to change the narrative, because the tone of some of the messaging can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and people keep hearing that there's no car parks. Well, then that's what they believe. So yep, we'll go to work some more to try and change that perception.
I think it would help if we had those figures, just as we put the cycling figures into the exec report, comes every quarter. It would be good to have that car park and that turnover and some of the data that's available on the car parks. Because the narrative this morning was there are now less car parks. You know, we're closing all these car parks when in fact that's not the case.
Yeah, the number I think that was quoted was 2,400 from 3 or 4 years ago. So there are less car parks than back then. But to Stephen's point, there are more today than there were 6, even 12 months ago. So with what's there today and what's planned over the next 6 months, we're getting back up to very close to the numbers of 3 or 4 years ago.
Bill and Shad.
Just also on that theme, I presume, Gareth, in terms of the parking tracker, that information's also provided or can be provided to downtown Tauranga, and picking up the previous points, from January this year to December, in fact, there will be a greater number, and that's without counting the new Devonport Road site or Hamilton Street. So going forward, there's also a positive story to be told. So I was quite heartened to actually see the detail in that tracker in terms of what's happening, and together making it clear that Spring Street and Elizabeth Street car parks are back to full capacity in terms of that ability to cater for parking post their earthquake strengthening. So,
yep, correct. And also they are now both, as you mentioned this morning, Anne, available on a first come, first served basis. So that's opened up a whole lot of car parks that were previously tied up with lease use and not being used. So that's made a big difference to availability as well. And you know, on some of the days, I've only got the September data because the October data hasn't come through yet, but some of the days at the busiest times, Elizabeth Street's only at 90% capacity, and you get to 3 or 4 in the afternoon on any given day, and there's a lot of capacity in both of the buildings. So again, that's that perception thing, that Spring Street car park is too far away from where I want to go to. So how do we educate people that actually it only took 43 seconds to walk from that car park to Red Square? It's not a lot of time, and start to change that narrative. So we'll take that away.
And just my final comment related to the library and community hub in terms of the detailed design, 100% virtually completed for that, and also site preparation works commencing this month, and then actual construction in January 2024. So it's the key, it's the first significant building project in Te Manawatake o Te Papa. So I really just wanted to acknowledge that and the team that have worked on that.
Thanks, Bill. Yep, Mike and the project team, and then Kim and the Te Manawatake board have done a great job, as have you as the chair of that steering group over the last 6 to 12 months, driving that project forward, and the team's fizzing to get cracking on site and actually start building. So yeah, we can't wait till January.
Fizzing for them.
Ed.
Thanks, Gareth. I won't kind of go back over the whole parking thing. I think from a commission perspective, you kind of understand where we are. But I think the data is actually really important, and actually providing that to downtown Tauranga will be helpful. And if we can have that regularly, I mean, if it was once a month, and we're able to provide that directly to partners, yeah, I think that would be really helpful. I mean, one of the things that kind of strikes me, in terms of the changing, how would I put it, the nature of our CBD, over the next number of years, we're going to have a whole lot of construction workers in town. I think it's in some ways, our business community in particular need to adjust to cater for that particular market. I mean, if there's 100 people next door on our 90 Devonport, if there's going to be another 100 down in Te Manawataki and across the waterfront, guys that need feeding at lunchtime, a pie and a Coke or a sandwich, or could get a cheap $10 curry. There is an opportunity, I think, particularly for our retail and hospitality sectors. And then once these things are finished, then you can kind of adjust back. I mean, you'll have 800,000 people next door on 90 Devonport. The office workers will hopefully be, will be back in the city, and you'll adjust to that clientele. I mean, you see it around Wellington, where you've got a mixture of both office and construction workers in and around the CBD that cater for both. And I suppose that's my encouragement, I suppose, to our downtown, whether it's hospitality or retail, is adjusting to the changing market and the changing season we're in as a city, because I think there are plenty of opportunities to take advantage of the people that are working in the CBD, whether they're commercial or whether they're in the construction industry. And I suppose that's my encouragement, particularly to downtown Tauranga.
Yep, this is a great observation, and really you only have to walk out of this building to the corner of Devonport Road and Elizabeth Street at lunchtime to see that critical mass of high-vis workers that are at the bakery or the sushi or at the Turkish. But yeah, what does a high-vis special look like for the rest of town? And on that matter, we had a new business open up in town last week on Willow Street, which is just 3 vending machines,
Three vending machines.
non-staffed, but appealing to that commercial worker in the city centre or a high-vis worker that just wants a can and a pie or whatever it is. Go and talk to a vending machine and get what you want, and away you go. So I think there are pockets of the city centre that have realised there is an opportunity there. And yeah, this is about resilience and how we get through the tough times, because no one's arguing with the fact that the next couple of years, because of disruption and change and everything, is going to be challenging. But that is why we set up the City Centre Development Incentive Fund too, to be able to respond to good ideas and support city centre businesses if they can help us find a solution to make things easier. So we'll definitely pass that challenge on, and I'm sure Ash and the team are up for supporting businesses in that space.
And just on another matter, I was talking to Dean Flavel the other day about kind of getting ready for Te Manawataki, and he was talking about the touchstone up in the civic whare. Something that kind of triggered my thinking was when the old town hall came down, there was probably a cornerstone or a foundation stone or something of significance when that building was first built, probably in the 1930s or whatever it was. It would be good to identify that. So whether there was a plaque or some kind of keystone or whatever, to acknowledge, I suppose, that relationship for the city, and then whether there's an opportunity to kind of bring that through in terms of acknowledging the past, but also what that looks like for the future.
Yeah, great idea. We'll bring it up with the project team.
Yes, and the other thing about businesses is that it's interesting because people's work habits have changed since COVID, and you notice it with the traffic. So Mondays and Fridays are low traffic days. Wednesday, everyone seems to be working in their office in town, so the traffic on a Wednesday. So listening to a couple of businesses recently who were saying, their Friday night after work drinks used to be a big night, but it's not anymore. Well, that's possibly partly because there's not as many workers in town who will go in for drinks after work. So and that's why we provided that mentoring and the capability building for businesses through the chamber, is to help people make sure that their businesses are can change according to the needs of the population at the time. The question I really want to know, though, is the transportation plan. So we've talked a lot about the disruption, and it's going to go on for a long period of time. And I know the transport team was working on a transport system that would remain constant. Where are we with that? And what's the consultation around that been with the businesses in town?
Let me come back to you on timelines. It's definitely a work in progress. Part of it's tied up with the business case for understanding the best locations for bus stops in the city centre, and that work is nearing the end. There has been consultation with the city centre community on that. It was workshop based, as I understand it. We probably could have gone and done a bit more shoulder tapping with key stakeholders in the city centre to understand some of their specific needs. But we've picked up on that in the last couple of weeks and are having some conversations to feed into the tail end of the business case and come back with proposed next steps. But I can circle back around in terms of timelines on that.
I think that's quite important. And, you know, buses aside, a lot of people still bring their cars into town. So for those businesses to have some certainty over what those routes are going to be, I keep saying we're not designing the city centre around buses, but we are designing it around how people move around the city. So I think that's going to be quite important too, because I'm just aware in that transportation there are some answers, albeit temporary, for some of the things that we've heard this morning.
Yes, that's correct. And part of what the movement framework is looking into is if we make some medium to long-term decisions about how the city centre is going to operate from a movement framework point of view, that the tactical interventions that we do now signal that now so that we're not changing things on an ongoing basis. So then people form a habit about the fact that the street's one way here and that doesn't keep changing over time. So I know that the framework's looking to set that up for success in terms of the short-term tactical interventions that drive the medium to long-term permanent solutions.
So things like taxi stands and things, all of that forms part of that wider framework, and people know that that's where the taxis are going to be in future.
Correct. And we've had this conversation internally about angle parking on the Strand. If the intention is never to put angle parking on the Strand for a variety of reasons, why would you do it now as a tactical intervention? Because it just sets up this behaviour that will be able to angle park on the Strand, that then you go and take that away. So we're better to understand and find the permanent solution and then do a tactical intervention to start driving the habit of using that now for the permanent change to come later on.
Okay, anything else on that? No, 90 Devonport's looking fantastic. Really exciting. Okay, so we just need a motion to receive the exec report, Bill and Shad. All those in favour say aye. Against carried. Local Government New Zealand report to members. Yeah, we our 2 hours, we should stop because we've been going for 2 hours, but we're going to finish this so that we can go into public excluded. Because we won't be long on this, there's not much there. Local Government New Zealand report to members. Any comments? Stephen?
Honest, the report didn't tell me a lot. And I'd like to understand clearly what localism is. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I am very sure that local government are very focused on it. And I must confess I didn't attend the conference, so perhaps I might have been
Didn't
informed.
explain.
better.
I did, and they didn't explain.
No.
It.
And I do think that that it is important that local government do explain what they're seeking to achieve and why. And this report certainly, I think the intent of it is excellent, but in terms of actually getting value out of it, it needs to improve quite a bit. So for those of you who are on the relevant committees, you might wish to feed that back in a nice way.
I think we should feed it back, because even if it's discussed somewhere, not everyone attends each meeting. And if there is a definition, I'm sure there is, or there is it's obviously their vision, or so there'll be supporting statements. They should be repeating those so that everybody understands what it is they're focused on, in particular an incoming government. So we'll feed that back. So we're just receiving that report. So we can provide feedback. Yep. So we can. Well, let's make that part of the feedback. You moving that, the recommendation and including your comments and the feedback? Bill, you seconding it?
Some commentary, and great to see that there is that prioritisation in terms of the focus of activity, but probably a bit more, because it talks about, for example, resetting the relationship with central government. Priority 3, campaigning for greater local decision making. Okay, that's fine, but what's the outcome to be achieved? So just a bit more teasing out in terms of those priorities.
They probably need to revise their priorities based on the incoming government's priorities too, and make sure they're aligned. Okay, Shared, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, just one. I mean, I'm surprised funding's not highlighted.
It's not a priority.
Oh,
And yet I've just spent a day down there where the premise that the funding for local government, the funding system for local government is unsustainable, but it isn't reflected here in one of their priorities. So I think there's whoever's taking notes, we could feed all that back. All right, so moved by Stephen, seconded by Bill. We've provided some feedback points. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. No late items. Can I have a mover and a seconder to go into public excluded? Shared and Bill. For the reasons outlined in the agenda, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, so we'll have a 5-minute